Malmstrom Air Force Base nuclear shutdown. In March 1967, Captain Robert Salas was on duty at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. Salas served as the Deputy Missile Combat Crew Commander. His job was to monitor and control nuclear missiles deep underground. Malmstrom Air Force Base housed Minuteman I intercontinental ballistic missiles. These nuclear missiles were part of America's defense system during the Cold War. Each missile could destroy an entire city if launched. On this particular night, Salas was working in the underground launch control facility. Security guards on the surface were protecting the missile silos above. Suddenly, Salas received an urgent phone call from the topside security team. The guards reported seeing something impossible hovering over the main gate. A glowing red saucer-shaped object was floating silently above the facility. The object was massive and giving off bright red light. The security guards were frightened by what they were witnessing. Salas listened to the report and tried to remain calm. Then something even more terrifying happened in the underground control room. The control panels began showing alarm signals. One by one, the Minuteman I nuclear missiles started going offline. The missiles entered what is called no-go status. No-go status means the missiles were completely disabled and could not be launched. Salas watched in shock as 10 nuclear missiles shut down one after another. Each missile was an independent system with its own power and controls. There was no technical reason why all 10 would fail at the exact same time. The missiles were being physically disconnected from the launch sequence. An unknown external force was shutting down America's nuclear weapons. Within minutes, all 10 missiles at the facility were completely disabled. Salas immediately reported the crisis to his commanders. Then he received even more disturbing news. A separate missile facility nearby reported the exact same incident. Their nuclear missiles had also shut down at the exact same time. Another glowing object had been seen hovering over their location. The United States Air Force launched an immediate investigation. Technical experts examined every part of the missile systems. They could not find any mechanical failure or technical problem. The systems had not malfunctioned on their own. Something or someone had deliberately shut down 20 nuclear missiles. The Air Force could never provide an explanation for what happened. Multiple high-ranking military witnesses confirmed the incident. Captain Robert Salas later testified publicly about the events. The Malmstrom AFB shutdown remains the most famous military nuclear UFO incident in history. Soviet nuclear missile activation incident. In 1982, a terrifying incident occurred at a Soviet nuclear base in Ukraine. The base was located in Bielo-Korovichi, a secret military installation. The facility housed intercontinental ballistic missiles, armed with nuclear warheads. These weapons were part of the Soviet Union's massive nuclear arsenal during the Cold War. On this particular night, security personnel noticed something in the sky above the base. A massive disc-shaped craft appeared and began hovering over the missile silos. The object was enormous and completely silent as it floated above the installation. Soviet officers watched in shock as the craft remained motionless overhead. The disc-shaped object stayed hovering over the nuclear silos for several hours. Military personnel had no idea what the craft was or what it wanted. Then something absolutely terrifying began happening inside the control room. The computer systems that controlled the nuclear missiles started activating on their own. Launch codes were suddenly being entered into the computers. Nobody in the control room was typing these codes. The computers were receiving commands from an unknown external source. Soviet officers watched in horror as the control panels lit up with warnings. The screens showed that the nuclear missiles were preparing for launch. The launch sequence had been initiated without any human authorization. The missiles were going through their pre-launch procedures automatically. In just moments, nuclear weapons could be fired at targets across the world. The Soviet officers in the control room experienced pure panic. They desperately tried to stop the launch sequence. But the computers would not respond to their commands. The system had been completely taken over by the unknown force. For 15 terrifying seconds, Soviet officers believed nuclear war was about to start. The missiles were seconds away from launching. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The massive disc-shaped craft flew away from the base at high speed. The moment the craft departed, the launch sequence abruptly canceled itself. The missiles powered down and returned to standby status. The computers stopped receiving the unauthorized launch codes. Soviet officers sat in stunned silence trying to understand what had just happened. Technical experts examined the computer systems immediately. They could not explain how the launch codes had been entered. The systems had not malfunctioned or been hacked in any conventional way. Something had demonstrated complete control over the Soviet Union's nuclear arsenal. The incident appeared to be a deliberate demonstration of power. Whatever intelligence controlled that craft could activate nuclear weapons at will. This was even more terrifying than the American incidents where missiles were disabled. Disabling weapons shows capability, but activating them shows total control. The Soviet military classified the incident as top secret. For decades, the event remained hidden from the public. The Bilokorovichy activation incident proves that these objects can control nuclear weapons in both directions. They can shut missiles down like at Malmstrom Air Force Base, but they can also turn them on and initiate launch sequences. Rendlesham Forest Nuclear Base Encounter. In December 1980, strange events began at a military base in the United Kingdom. The Bentwaters Air Base was a joint US-UK facility near Rendlesham Forest. What most people did not know was that the base secretly stored nuclear warheads for NATO. Massive stockpiles of nuclear weapons were hidden in special bunkers on the property. The incident that would unfold became known as the Rendlesham Forest Incident. It remains one of the most documented UFO cases in military history. On the night of December 26, 1980, security personnel saw lights in the forest. Multiple airmen reported seeing a metallic, triangular craft descending into the trees. The object appeared to land in Rendlesham Forest, just outside the base perimeter. Military personnel were sent to investigate the strange lights. When they entered the forest, they found the triangular craft sitting on the ground. The object was metallic and glowed with unusual lights. The airmen who saw it were trained military observers, not civilians. Their reports were detailed and credible. The next night, more strange activity occurred at the base. Deputy Base Commander Colonel Charles Halt decided to lead an investigation personally. Colonel Halt was a high-ranking officer with years of military experience. He assembled a team and brought scientific equipment into the forest. The team carried a Geiger counter to measure radiation levels. When they reached the area where the craft had been seen, they made a shocking discovery. The Geiger counter showed radiation readings 10 times higher than normal background levels. Something radioactive had definitely been at that location. Colonel Halt recorded audio of the entire investigation on a tape recorder. His voice on the recording sounds visibly shaken as he describes what the team is seeing. The most disturbing revelation came from what happened on the third night. The triangular craft returned and was seen hovering near the base. Witnesses reported that the craft was beaming bright lights downward. The beams of light were aimed directly at the hardened aircraft shelters. Hardened aircraft shelters are reinforced concrete bunkers. At Bentwaters, these shelters contain the secret nuclear weapons stockpile. The craft appeared to be scanning or targeting the exact locations where nuclear warheads were stored. Whatever intelligence controlled the object knew precisely where the nuclear weapons were hidden. Multiple military personnel witnessed the beams of light hitting the nuclear storage bunkers. Over 3 nights, dozens of trained military observers saw the triangular craft. The British Ministry of Defense investigated the incident. The United States Air Force also conducted classified investigations. Colonel Halt's audio recording was eventually released to the public. Listening to the tape, you can hear the fear and confusion in his voice. The radiation readings at the landing site were documented and could not be explained. The Rendlesham Forest incident remains unexplained by both the UK and US governments. Minot Air Force Base B-52 UFO encounter. On October 24, 1968, a B-52 Stratofortress bomber was flying over North Dakota. The aircraft was assigned to Minot Air Force Base. This was not an ordinary training flight. The B-52 bomber was carrying nuclear warheads as part of a strategic mission. The crew was flying their regular patrol route over the northern United States. Suddenly, the crew noticed something impossible in the sky near their aircraft. A massive, unidentified flying object appeared alongside the bomber. The UFO was roughly the size of a football field. The enormous craft began pacing the B-52, matching its speed and altitude perfectly. The bomber crew watched in shock as the object stayed with them. The UFO showed no signs of being a normal aircraft. It had no visible wings, engines, or standard aviation lights. As the massive object moved closer to the B-52, something went wrong. The bomber's long-range radio system suddenly failed completely. The crew could no longer communicate with Minot Air Force Base. They were flying a nuclear-armed aircraft with no radio contact. At the exact same moment on the ground below, alarms began triggering. The security alarms for nuclear missile silos were going off one after another. The silos were directly beneath the B-52's flight path. Ground personnel rushed to check what was causing the alarm system to activate. They found no intruders or technical malfunctions. The alarms were responding to something they could not see or identify. Meanwhile, radar operators at Minot AFB were tracking something extraordinary. Their radar scopes showed the massive UFO clearly. The object was moving at speeds over 3,000 miles per hour. No known aircraft in 1968 could travel that fast. Then the radar showed something even more impossible. The UFO came to a complete dead stop in midair. It halted instantly near the nuclear-armed B-52 bomber. Objects traveling at 3,000 miles per hour cannot stop instantly without destroying themselves. The physics of such a maneuver should be impossible. The Minot AFB incident is unique because it had triple confirmation. The UFO was tracked on radar from the ground, it was seen visually by personnel on the ground, and it was witnessed directly by the flight crew in the air. All three sources of evidence confirmed the same object at the same time. After several tense minutes, the UFO suddenly accelerated and disappeared. The moment it left, the B-52's radio systems came back online. The security alarms on the ground stopped triggering. The United States Air Force investigated the incident through Project Blue Book. Project Blue Book was the official government program studying UFO reports. The files were eventually declassified and released to the public. The declassified documents include the actual radar scope images. The images show the object moving at impossible speeds and stopping near the bomber. The Minot AFB encounter proves that these objects specifically target nuclear-armed aircraft.